be this, and it's being recorded, as you just hopefully heard. So we're just going live on Facebook now as we start the meeting. Want to make sure everyone can participate remotely and that you all know you are being recorded so that other folks in the community can engage in this conversation as it continues going on past today. And we're just waiting for that to start, and we are now live on Facebook. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for part 3 of 3, so far 3, of our community conversations about the revitalization of Milpitas. Liz Medina is helping from the City of Milpitas run through some of these slides tonight. Thank you, Liz, for your help in doing so. We also have interpretation available in 2 languages, Vietnamese and Spanish. So if you come down here to the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, it will say French for Vietnamese, but that's because Zoom hasn't figured that out yet. So we do have it available in Vietnamese in place of French and Spanish for Spanish. Thanks, Imelda and Tree, for being available. If anyone wants interpretation, please start clicking on that now so we can know if Imelda and Tree are going to be interpreting for us tonight. Welcome, excited to have you all here. My name is Alex. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a few minutes. We're excited to have you here, and we really, really are grateful for your thoughts and your ideas. We're going to get to the meat of this session in about 45 to 55 minutes, and then we'll break up into small groups and hear from all of you. We did have 42 folks registered today, so if you see a lot of City of Milpitas staff, that's because we expected a few more folks, and maybe they'll be joining us soon. But that just means you'll get a lot of one-on-one experience and conversation with a lot of great City of Milpitas staff. So they will be joining you in your small groups and in a few minutes. So we will work very, very hard to get you out of here by 8 o'clock. If we're a smaller group, it might actually go a little faster tonight, but let's see how things go. We definitely want to spend as much time as we can getting your ideas on how to revitalize Milpitas. And again, this is part 3 of 3 conversations. Tonight is focused on the historic and cultural resources of Milpitas. Let's go to our next slide. So we welcome all of you being on camera. If you're munching on dinner and you want to jump off for a moment, we completely understand, but we welcome seeing you. In the meantime, if you wouldn't put yourself on mute, we promise and those of you who have gone to our previous 2 community conversations know that we'll have a lot of time for community input, and we'll spend about 45 to 55 minutes doing that. So there will be plenty of time to chat as we go through this presentation. If you wouldn't mind staying muted, we would really appreciate that. Put those questions in the chat function down at the bottom of your screen. You can see that chat button. Click on that, and you can absolutely start to chat with city staff, with fellow community members. That's the best way to put in questions throughout the presentation. If anyone needs American Sign Language interpretation, if you see a live transcript button, you should be able to pick up a written transcript of what folks are saying in this conversation. Next slide. Oh, sorry, could you go one back there? Yeah, so we are recording tonight's meetings. The small groups will be taking notes. Our City of Milpitas staff will be taking notes on behalf of our small group facilitators. We will be recording this portion of the evening as well as the final report back at the end. So those will be up on the city's website and Catalyze SV's YouTube page as well, and we will share those out with you. Next slide. So we want to welcome all of you. We've got some Milpitans in the house. How many Milpitas residents, show of hands, are here with us tonight? Allison, James, wonderful. Thank you so much. Bill, did I see your hand too? Appreciate it. We've got any history buffs in the room? Any show of hands of Joseph? Excellent, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. We won't have a chance to hear too much about that history from community members, but we will have a lot of chance to hear how you think we should share that history back with Milpitas folks. So that'll be the crux of how we talk about history tonight. How about any city commissioners? Maybe show of hands. Any of our city commissioners here tonight? I know we've got at least one. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. City Commissioner. I'm sorry?
I saw 3 hands.
3. Wonderful. And we've got our facilitators. We've got some facilitators to facilitate small groups. I know Derek is here. Hey, Derek, thanks for being here. Good to see you. We may or may not have any council members joining us. Do we have any council members here tonight so far? I know Councilmember Montano has attended portions of the last 2 community conversations, so maybe she'll show up in a little bit. And then for those of you who are going to be interacting with them tonight or in the future, we would love to introduce our city staff who are here joining us. We'll start with the masterminds behind these community conversations, Jay Lee and Ned Thomas. Will you come on and say your name, title, and department?
Yes, good evening, everyone. This is Ned Thomas. I'm the planning director for the City of Milpitas, and we're very happy to have you here tonight. And I don't know if you're already going to do this, Alex, but I do want to specifically call out a couple of members of the Historical Society that I know are here. I know longtime members and history buffs, Joseph E. Hart and Bill Hare. We really appreciate your being here tonight, because I know you have a lot to say about this particular topic. So Jay, I'll turn over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Jay Lee, Principal Planner with the City of Milpitas, and I will be the project manager for a specific plan update for the entire Midtown area. So following this night, if you have any questions about Main Street or follow-up questions or anything about Midtown and even the specific plan, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Jay. We've got more. We've got a couple history-focused friends at the City of Milpitas, who one of whom you're going to be hearing from tonight, Renee and Tegan. Renee and Tegan, do you want to say hello?
Good evening, everyone. Renee Lorenzen, Director of Recreation and Community Services for the City of Milpitas, and glad to be back for the 3rd night.
Hi, I'm Tegan McLean. I'm the Community Engagement and Inclusion Administrator, and I am happy to be here as well. I am also the liaison for the Arts Commission.
Awesome, thanks. We've got Ashwini and Alex from the city as well. Would you like to say hello?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Good evening, everyone. Ashwini Kantak, Assistant City Manager. Really enjoyed the last 2 community conversations and excited to be here today. Thank you for being here.
And Alex Andrade, if you want to say hello.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Alex Andrade, Director of Economic Development for the City of Milpitas. It is my absolute pleasure to be here and be a resource for you in all things economic development. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Adrian, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. You want to say hey?
Hi, everyone. My name's Adrienne Smith. I'm an associate planner with the city. I had an opportunity to observe the last meeting, and there was a lot of great feedback from everyone. So I'm looking forward to what tonight brings. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Adrienne. And the wizard behind the technological curtain, Liz Medina. Will you say hi, Liz, real quick?
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate all your help tonight. So those are some of the city staff. We'll be breaking up into small groups, dividing, and you can chat with them during those small groups. We're grateful to have them here. Let's head to the next slide. Keep moving. So again, I don't know if maybe I forgot to say, my name is Alex Shore. I'm the co-founder and executive director of a local community-based organization called Catalyze SV. We care about really inclusive, collaborative community engagement. And that's what brings us here tonight to partner with the City of Milpitas, which has brought us on board to help facilitate this conversation and figure out how we can get the best ideas possible from community members. So we're not affiliated or benefiting from folks on Main Street. We just really care about good community engagement. And we're so grateful to be part of these 3 conversations with the City of Milpitas, having a lot of fun and loving working with you all in Milpitas, both the city and community members and stakeholders. So I'll be facilitating tonight's conversation. Before we break up into the small groups, then we'll have our small group facilitators jump in. Next slide. So our role as facilitators tonight, we hope we can focus just on the guy on the left. It's sometimes a combination of all 3, but first and foremost, we want to be welcoming and inviting to all of you to make you feel like you're part of this conversation. We truly want every voice to be able to contribute. If things get off track or off agenda, then perhaps the general steps in to keep things going. And finally, to make things fair and everyone has an equal opportunity to participate, the referee makes sure that things are equal and fair for all of us. So keep that in mind as our facilitators are just trying to get your ideas. And if your facilitator is a volunteer, they're a Catalyze SV volunteer. That means they're a community member just like you. So please be patient, respectful, and allow them to direct the conversation to some of the questions we want to ask you here tonight. Next slide. So as we're going through the presentation, we do want to respect everyone's input and make sure that no single person is dominating. Everyone's going to participate. So if our facilitators do something like say, hey, Allison, would you mind jumping in? Or James, we haven't had a chance to hear from you yet. They may ask folks, and that's just because we want to be super inclusive and inviting to everyone. We do have an agenda and agreement with all of you to get out of here at 8 o'clock tonight. So we are going to keep things moving through the agenda. We are not going to be able to cover everything we'd like to talk about tonight. So we are going to ask politely to refrain from giving history lessons. We know that we have a ton of folks who know a ton about history of Milpitas. As I said earlier, tonight is about figuring out how to honor that history, not what that history is. And we know it's fun, we know it's important, but we want to talk about how to share history, not what the history is. So if facilitators or staff jump in and say, hey, do you mind if we get back to the main event? Please understand it's just so we can talk about how to focus on the main aspects of this. If something's not related to Main Street today, we will also be rerouting that. Again, you have lots of city staff that you can ask questions to. We'll have their contact information at the end. You can follow up with them. And if you want to talk about, City Hall hours or City Hall's building about Milpitas, we'll also reroute those kind of topics because we are pretty focused tonight on this agenda and the historical and cultural resources of Milpitas. Next slide. So we have had 2 conversations already. Again, this is part 3. The 2 conversations, part 1 was super involved with the Office of Economic Development, Alex Andrade and his team. You heard from him a moment ago. The Small Business Economic Development presentation and report back is available on YouTube. Also last month, we had a conversation about housing and housing development in Milpitas. Both of those conversations are on the link in YouTube. Jay or Liz, if you have a moment and just copy and paste that link and put it in the chat function for anyone who wants to check it out. It's a little easier than folks trying to copy in every single letter in that down. So we'll send that in the chat function if anyone wants to watch parts 1 and part 2. Next slide. So our objectives today are threefold. We want everyone to have a better understanding of Main Street, which is a very specific part of Midtown Milpitas. So you may hear or see the word Midtown. Main Street is a part of Midtown. We're not focused on all of Midtown today, but specifically Main Street. We want to hear your ideas about the development of Main Street, particularly around historic and cultural resources. And we're going to take all those ideas that you share that our facilitators are writing notes on, we'll give them back, to the City of Milpitas, and we'll share a report out with you on what you told us, and that will inform next steps that the City of Milpitas is going to take, which they're going to talk about in a few minutes.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, Leilani.
Hey, Alex. In regards to the historical references, can you repeat that last blurb about the, historical and XYZ perceptions we welcome? It was another word besides historical. Maybe
Oh, cultural resources.
cultural.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So sorry for interrupting.
That's okay. Historical and cultural resources. So we'll have questions about both of those subjects, primarily history, but there's great culture that we're thinking about and celebrating. I know the council and staff are working on that when it comes to Main Street as well. Next slide. So our agenda for tonight, we've already accomplished 2 parts of it, so we're making good progress. In a moment, we're going to start talking about the site context and the history of Main Street. The City of Milpitas has prepared some fantastic slides and some images from days gone by, so we're going to look at those. We'll also look at some videos of Main Street for those who haven't been out recently to help orient folks a little bit. Then we'll break up for about 45 to 55 minutes into our small groups with our facilitators to walk you through those questions that we'd like to ask and that ideas and information we'd like to gather from you. And then we'll come back at 7:45. Liz will bring us back with a couple minutes notice ahead of time, and we'll share back to the large group what we heard in small groups. And then finally, we'll talk about the city's next steps as part of this process. So a little bit about the site. You can see Main Street is the middle of those 3 parallel streets. You probably know Abel, of course. Sorry, that's not a street. That is the train tracks, as I recall. So Main Street is there in the middle. And we'll be focusing on, next slide, Liz. We'll be focusing on the portion of Main Street on the north end, which is the empty parcel just north of Milpitas Library down to the south end at Tom Evatt Park. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on Main Street already, tons of different ways that the street is being used by businesses and community members. We also have some vacant land, and then we've got bike lanes and different lanes of traffic as well as you go down Main Street. So to go into Main Street more, both the planning process as well as the history, we're going to start turning it over to Milpitas staff, starting with the man you heard from earlier, Jay Lee, who is one of the main people who's put together this information and working on the Main Street revitalization. Jay, take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm excited to be here, really to provide some background information on Main Street, to really help set the stage so that we can hear from you guys and hear some feedback on how to make it better. So thank you for your time. So let's look a little bit at what Main Street is like today. In a little more detail, Alex gave a nice overview, but as you can see here, these photos show that Main Street is a diverse place. There are a lot of different types of businesses and land uses, for example, open space and parks. You have local businesses, and yeah, you just have a lot of, it's a very diverse place. And but also something important to note is that around Main Street, you also have a lot of single family residential neighborhoods. To the north, you have single family homes. To the east and west, you also have single family homes and some townhouses. And to the south, you have some higher density multifamily development. Next slide, please. Another thing I want to mention about Main Street and also Midtown is that this is an area that is well served by transit. So this is important to keep in mind. It's a place where people can easily get to and get out of. Of course, you have VTA bus lines, as you can see on the map below. You also have the BART station, which is about a mile or a little more to the south. You also have bike lanes that run on Main Street. There currently are bike lanes that are shown by an actual painted line, but the city has plans to increase the protection along these bike lanes so that it'll be a more bike-friendly place. And the good news is that we have more transportation solutions on the way. I just want to mention that we have something called Milpitas On Demand, which we are hoping to start soon. The city won a grant from VTA to implement a flexible on-demand transit system to provide yet another option for our residents, employees, and visitors. So riders will be able to access key destinations, including employment centers, retail shopping centers, and of course, even Main Street, through basically van pools. And there will be key hubs, virtual stops in Main Street, but also along throughout all of Midtown. Next slide, please. All right, so getting a little bit to the actual topic on hand, to focus in a bit on the community and history of Main Street. Renee will go into greater detail, but just as you can see in this slide right here, to provide an overview, you see that there are a lot of historic resources and cultural resources along Main Street. You have the library, you have a hospital, you have religious facilities, you have there is a concentration in on Main Street when it comes to historic and cultural resources. And that's something that we recognize and we want to celebrate moving forward. So as Main Street revitalizes and transforms, we just want to make sure that Main Street and the surrounding neighborhoods don't lose their community character. So for a little bit more detail about the history and the culture on Main Street, I'll now pass it off to Renee.
Great. Thank you, Jay. Again, Renee Lorenzen, Director of Recreation and Community Services. I'm going to start off this first slide with the disclaimer, since I'm in the presence of greatness of two of our Milpitas Historical Society members, that I am not a historian, lover of Milpitas, and listen intently to their stories, and happen to have many photos that were graciously shared with the city over the last couple decades. So we're going to go over a little bit of Milpitas' history and show some photos that I selected for everyone. So Main Street's history. So as many of you know, or may not know, Main Street has been a very important crossroad due to the location of Main Street in the Bay Area and the way people were traveling and migrating from the south to the north, but also it's Milpitas in general. This was where people shopped. Liz, you can go on to the next slide. It's where people shopped. It's where they went to school. It's where they went to church. They celebrated their culture in the streets with parades. They visited their doctor on Main Street. They dined. They did business on Main Street. If they were traveling and visiting Milpitas, this is where they lodged. Milpitas was home to the first, the blacksmith shop, the Windsor Blacksmith Shop. It was the first grammar school, which is a national historical site. We've got water towers that are still there, the Rathbone Saloon and Hotel, which many of you know is Campbell's Corner, and the Crackaloosie Drugstore. These are just some of the few businesses that basically opened on our Main Street several decades ago. Next slide. Just to touch on a few important times in history that helped shape what Main Street looked like over the last, well, several decades. Was the 19th century. It was the marketing center. It was the hub for farmers. They grew and raised their animals and their agriculture, and this is where they started their shops. They sold here. They shipped from here. This is where people came in to sell. These were relationships really started between our founding families was on Main Street. In the 20s, Milpitas was still orchards, it was still farms, but you saw the rail lines introduced. You had that second rail line, the Southern Pacific Milpitas Station, come through Milpitas and change transportation, change who came to Milpitas, how people left Milpitas, and what Main Street really looked like. Then you went into the 1950s, the Ford Motor Company, that blew Milpitas up, not only locally, but nationally. We had the first planned integrated neighborhood, Sunny Hills, in the entire nation. So many people moved here and lived here, and the storefronts and the businesses and the experiences on Main Street also shifted with those times. It became a stopover, more so, between San Jose and Oakland as people traveled up through the Bay Area. Sorry, my cat wants to contribute to this presentation. Just ignore her. In the 1990s, you saw continued expansion. You saw more of the commercial businesses come into Main Street, so more of the industries, childcare centers, temples, churches started to pop up in celebration of what Main Street and Milpitas really stood for, which was diversity. And then the 2000s to present, yes, some disinvestment in the area, some complacency in development, but recently, and most exciting, is there's some residential development to the south of Main Street, and then leading up to today, the interest from the community and also the leadership from our council to really have these community conversations about what do we want Main Street to be, what do we want to experience when we're there, and what do we want to preserve. Next slide. So these are some photos. I have a plethora of them, and I do want to say again, thank you to the Milpitas Historical Society, Bob Burrell, and a lot of the founding families who have shared these photos with the city over the last many decades. So this is actually, I believe, and Joe and Bill can yell at me later if I'm wrong, but it's labeled in our folders as from the 1890s and early 1900s. This is Main Street. The first one on the left, that's Main Street looking north. And then the second one is Main Street looking south. Although I was trying to pick up some sort of landmark markers to tell me where we are on the street when we're taking these photos, I don't think we can quite do that, but you can see that it's horse and buggy and wagon. In the photo that is looking south, you can see the horse and trailer, the horse and carriage and wagon coming at you. The streets are dirt. You see the beginnings of some sidewalks, but I don't believe those were concrete at any point, but this is what and how our Main Street started. Next slide. Next slide. There you go. This one I love. This is the hitching post. And you can see several people have parked on Main Street here. And then the building to the right, it looks to be about 2 stories, probably with some hotel rooms or residential living on the top. But this is the Paseo General Store. And you see it there in the hitching post where people have parked and are, presumably getting off and doing some shopping and dining, living. And then as I was going through the folders, I found the front of the facade of the building of the Paseo store. And that was really exciting to me. You can see, if you're able to zoom in at all, they've staged the people around the store for the photo. Joe and Bill can correct me later, but I think this might have been Maple Hall. I'm not quite sure, but this was the general store on Main Street, an important place. And Tashodi, you also know, was an important family, came from the Azores, Portugal, many, many years ago, and there's streets named after this family still in Milpitas today. Next slide. So here's some other industries and important names in Milpitas and Main Street history. So you've got the Windsor Blacksmith Shop. On the left, you can still see some of their brands in the parking garage of the Milpitas Library to this day. I think their wall is there. It's where they practice their brands on the wood. It's beautiful, and it's preserved there so that everyone can see it. In the middle is Carlo's store. The Carlo family was here for years. There's another arterial street off Main Street named for this family. They also had a dry goods and grocery store. I have a couple photos that are labeled candy and a trim. So I know they had a couple things you could do inside of their store. And this family, I believe, was the owner of Cozy Kitchen, which we'll see in just a few minutes. And then on the right is the Abel Butcher Shop. The Abel family, it was 2 brothers that ran this shop. It was on Main Street as well. We all know about Abel Street, another founding family. When I was looking through this, looking through photos and the folder for this, I zoomed in on the white sign. You can see it. There's beautiful flowers and flags at the top. And it looks like he had won some sort of butcher or meat cutting contest, but it was like 1890. And it was just so awesome to kind of date this photo and how far back that industry had been in California, but also in Milpitas.
Renee?
Yes.
I think that was an award that they got at the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, Joe.
San Francisco.
Yep. Next slide.
And Renee, if you can just slow down ever so slightly for our interpreters, that would be great.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I will. So this next one is a picture of a blacksmith shop. There wasn't a name attached to it in the photo, but it just showed the hard work and the talent of the people that worked back then to create those ironworks. And then the picture to the right is a picture of the Southern Pacific Milpitas station, people greeting the train. You see people on the train waving. You see people walking in front of the train. I'm hoping at this point that it was no longer moving, but you can see in the background the hillside and the land waiting for development in the background. Next slide. And then here is some photos that were taken in the early 50s. And the first one is Cozy Kitchen. I am pleased to have eaten there at least one time. And it was great food, great fun. And this was, again, the Carlo family owned and ran this restaurant. Rumor has it, some of the best meetings were held in this restaurant along with the Catalyze building, but some great decisions were made here and meetings were at this Cozy Kitchen. Great place, miss it. It's no longer standing, but the lot is still there. And then in the middle is our grammar school. This was taken in the 50s. You can still see the grammar school at the lettering at the top of the building. This is a National Registry Historic Landmark. It is part of the facade of the Milpitas Library. If you went in the doors back then, and then actually going into the 80s and 90s, you go up the steps and through the front doors, and then there's this beautiful open air plaza area. And I believe the Chamber of Commerce had a small kiosk office there at one point. The senior center was there. Recreation programs were there with lots of classrooms and meeting rooms built all around it. And then as you went further back, you had this beautiful auditorium and ornate stage. Well, that auditorium, along with the facade, still remain today in the Milpitas Library. So if you go in there, you can actually walk into that history and look at the detail and the beauty of that part of the building. So they did that, they transitioned that beautifully with the library. And then on the far right is the Catalyze store, drugstore. And then you can see there that it was also, I think, a Greyhound depot, if I'm reading that correctly. This building still stands. There's apartments at the top, and I believe Ann Jan's would be all the way to the right of the photo. I was in there the other day getting some chicken feed. Beautiful building. Catalyze still owns and operates that. And he came here, I believe, in the 1920s and was a pharmacist and became very influential and a major figure in Milpitas and Main Street history. Next slide. So with history, of course, there's culture. As I mentioned before, there was a large Portuguese migrant family. All the families had come over. There was a huge Portuguese representation in Milpitas, and Main Street was one of the places that they celebrated that. So we've got the Holy Ghost Festa and Parade. This was an early 1900s photo that we've got here. You can see the cars. If I'd guess, probably around the 1920s. Is that right, Joe? Ish.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure in my mind about the date, but yeah, but that's probably about right.
Yeah, this was an annual event, and you can see on the photos on the right, the dress is a little bit more modern than the picture on the left, and you can see the beginnings of the Cozy Kitchen right behind the parade walkers. So this was a major event celebrating important culture to the residents of Milpitas. Next slide. But I also thought a great way to show the cultural diversity of Milpitas and Main Street was actually in the school class photos from the grammar school on Main Street. And if you look at the faces of all the students and the children, you can see that diversity, different backgrounds, different families, all together. And I would venture to say that if you look at every other class photo since then in Milpitas, you're going to see this great diversity. That myriad of cultures is something that Milpitas was proud of back in the day, and it remains something that is of pride of the residents who live here now. Next slide. So how are some of these areas captured on Main Street today? So there were some photos taken around Main Street of different plaques or signs. So the one on the left, you see, that is the one that's out in front of the Milpitas Grammar School and calls out the year 1916, out in front of the library and the grammar school steps. The one in the middle, the Silvera House, that's still on the south side of Main Street. It is a business right now, but it tells the story of the architecture of the Queen Anne Cottage that still remains today, the original family, what they did at the house, and the people that were instrumental in making sure that the house was restored and kept in its historic condition. And then on the right, you've got the cultural resource sign again, a little bit different variation, but again, calls out the site, the original French hotel from 1857. Next slide. This was a more recent historical marker plaque that went up, recent as in the 1990s. So this is the Rensselaer House, or as most people know it, the DeVries property. And you can see the plaque here. It tells the story of the families that lived there and when the house was designated as a resource, and then it has a photo on it of what the house looked like back in the early 1900s. And then on the right, that's a picture of the DeVries house today. And you can see the plaque on the lower right-hand side column. Next slide. So what is the city's role in history and cultural preservation? The city is here to help preserve and protect our city's historical resources. Several years ago, they did put together a historic and cultural preservation plan that we're still working on today. There's also the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Commission, and their charge is to advise the City Council on matters pertaining to history and culture and the preservation of those. So recently, the commission added to their work plan, and they're working on it now, as a historical marker program in an attempt to not only preserve, but help educate current and future residents on, for example, the city parks. Many of them are named for people, but nobody knows who those people are. Who was Tom Cardozo? Who was Frederick Creighton? Who was Leo Murphy? Those are things that the commission wants to capture, write the story, and then help tell, both at the parks with aesthetically improved signs and language, but also something that people can access online in a virtual park tour. The marker design, like I mentioned, that will have some artistic influence. So when people are in the park, walking around the park, they're going to notice it, read, and be even more educated on some of the history and culture in town. There's also a virtual map of historic sites through Milpitas that was completed through our information technology GIS staff. That map is great. You can click on it, see some photos of today and yesterday of the historic sites with a little bit of content about who were there, what that site is known for, and what it looks like basically today versus yesterday. And then the commission also looks to support the Milpitas Historical Society with their annual tour. I know with COVID that hasn't been possible, but we have two gentlemen on today who were instrumental in putting those tours together, where you get on a bus and these great people that know all the history in great detail, more so than me, tell the story about locations, who lived there, who did business there, how the families interconnected, and how they supported the development of Main Street. One of the great moments on that tour was taking people into and looking at those brands of the Windsor family and the blacksmith shop. Next slide. So we also, the city wants to work with our partner organizations and our stakeholders. And one of those partners and organizations is the Milpitas Historical Society. That society was founded in the 1980s. And it was a group of very wonderful people who wanted to make sure that our heritage and our history wasn't lost. On their website, you can see it. Their mission is focused on preserving our past to protect our future. And so they've been very helpful to the city in working on projects such as Higuera Adobe in the 80s and early 90s, the Alviso Adobe, where landmarks are on Main Street, which has been super helpful. And then sometimes just a phone call from me answering that, or an email on who these families were and how they relate to places on Main Street, and things of that nature. And so some of these names on this photo, you'll see you've got Pat Loomis, who wrote one of the Milpitas books, the Levines, the McGuires, the Murphys, and the Cavaliers. So it's a great group that provide a lot of support to the city when it comes to history, as well as on Main Street. Next slide. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to Jay, and look forward to listening to everyone in their chat groups. Yes, Alex.
Oh, thanks, Renee. Before we run over back to Jay, just want to recognize and thank Vice Mayor Montano, who has joined us. Thank you for being here again, Vice Mayor. I know you're so passionate about Main Street, and it's exciting to see you again. If you want to wave and say hi real quick.
Hi, everyone. I had another meeting, so I ran over here to join you, and I have to leave at 7. So I have another meeting at 7, but whatever I could help out, I'm here. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Appreciate it. Jay, let's turn it back to you.
All right, thank you, Renee. That was a lot of great information, and as we can all see, Main Street and Milpitas' history is rich. So I think that gives us a great opportunity moving forward. And I really like that quote that was on the previous slide about looking at our past to protect our future. And that's really what we're hoping to do here. So and let's to kind of bring it back to, how do we take this and what do we do with it, right? What do we do with our rich history? How do we celebrate it and help Midtown and Main Street transform in a way that really is uniquely Milpitas? So this is why we're here today, and I do want to provide a brief overview of the specific plan that's in place right now. So I'm guessing we all know, but Midtown is the larger area, which includes Main Street, and it was the historic commercial and industrial core of the city, with Main Street as a key corridor running through the middle. And I also want to explain what a specific plan is. It's a general plan. Unlike a general plan, which provides more general policies for the entire city, a specific plan provides policies and zoning and land use requirements for a specific neighborhood. So we have an opportunity here with the existing specific plan, and also with our hopes to update this specific plan. We have a unique opportunity to really focus on what's important. And I do want to mention that the vision for the current plan is to really encourage mixed use development in an area that has access to transportation, but also to really facilitate economic redevelopment. And while this is an important part of the existing plan, even the existing plan does mention that the community character is important to this area. It does include policies to establish a uniquely Milpitas identity through historic preservation, but also context-sensitive design of new buildings. So, as we look at the identity today, right? I think it's there is no distinct identity. I think there is a lot there, but I think we can help improve the character of this area to really highlight the history. There is a unique and nice mix of old and new, and we want to see how we can marry these together to really help make this a great place. So that's why we're here today, to get a lot of feedback from you all. Next slide, please. And now, so we are going to update the plan, and we do want to rename it to the Gateway Main Street Specific Plan to reflect the greater emphasis on Main Street. And as you can see in the map, there are 3 focus areas. One of them, of course, is Main Street, but there's also Calaveras Boulevard and also Abbott Avenue as it runs along 880 freeway. And we do think the old plan was maybe trying to do too much. It was a very large geographical area that it covered, but we want to narrow the focus to these areas so that we can help concentrate mixed-use development in these focus areas for a vibrant and dynamic mixed-use neighborhood. But of course, we do want to accomplish this in a way that protects the existing neighborhood. So tonight's focus is to, for all of us, to discuss how we can transform Main Street in a way that celebrates its rich history and culture. And I saw in the chat, I think there was a question about what about the previous history, right? Going further back to the indigenous times. And I thank you for that comment, because that's a great comment. That's great feedback. That is something that we won't forget. I think just for this presentation, we were focusing, I think, a lot on Main Street itself. So we were really thinking about when Main Street came in and then the stuff that happened on Main Street. But we do appreciate that comment, because that's something that we also want to celebrate, right? Which cannot be forgotten, not just for Main Street, but for the entire Midtown area. So I think that's where we'll have more opportunities to do that. All right, next slide, please. So real quickly, before we get into the meat of this this conversation, I want to quickly go over the next steps. So right now, this is our last conversation. Sad that it's kind of coming to an end, because I've really enjoyed each conversation. But you know, we will provide a summary report with Alex's help, so that everyone can access this to see what great feedback we got from all the small group discussions, which will be happening next month. And then in August, this is actually when we'll kick off the Gateway Main Street specific plan. And the great thing about this outreach is that we were able to start it even before we started the plan. So we really love that we can get your early feedback, because we think this will be really important in helping shape our plan moving forward. And I do want to assure you, like everything that we hear today, like we will give this to our consultants. We will work with them to make sure that the things that we discuss here are carried forward, and we will have more outreach. So especially in the late summer and fall of this year, this is not the end of community outreach. This will continue throughout the entire plan. So we'll try to do that in many different ways, whether it's a survey, whether it's through workshops, and we'll be creative given the times today, right, with the pandemic. So I do want to just really highlight that this will continue to happen, and we really, really want you guys to keep participating, because even already we feel like we've learned so much through these conversations. So thank you, and I'll pass it to Alex to show some of his videos from his site visit.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Liz. I'm about to do some screen sharing. For those who haven't been along Main Street recently, we wish we were all there in person. We wish we were all in person together. We started these workshops a couple months ago when the world was not open. So we thought we would, instead of walk the site, do some virtual site walking through videos that we recorded of 4 different sections along Main Street. So we'll show those really quick. Most of you are probably pretty familiar, but just in case it helps orient you, gets the creative juices flowing as we're thinking about the future of Main Street and how to celebrate its historical and cultural resources. Let's take a look at what we're seeing right now in that area. So I'm gonna screen share and show these videos. Let's start with the far north part of Main Street. Here we go. And you'll hear some sound as well. Here we are on Main Street again. This is Main and Weller. You're seeing some housing in the background, a Christian church here, and of course the Milpitas Library right here. As we turn around toward the beautiful eastern foothills, you can see this vacant parcel of land that is slated for a public park. This is the northernmost edge of the Main Street that we're talking about today. Just pan back one more time as we look south down Main Street. Could everyone hear and see that?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, great. Well, let's do a couple other short videos. We're gonna come down Main Street now as we head south. So let's start our next one right now. Here we go. Here we are at the entrance of Main Street. We've got Valley Health Center in Milpitas right in front of us here. Got the Milpitas Public Library right there. As you turn on to Main Street. Okay, we've got a couple more. One moment. Can you see that third one? Here we go. Here we are on the corner of Sarah Way and South Main Street, sort of the middle portion of Main Street. You can see a couple of historic buildings here. There is Sarah towards 880, and then looking north on Main Street. You can see 2, maybe 3-story buildings there. And this again as we look south. Okay, so hopefully that gives you, we've got one more, a good sense of the middle portion of Main Street. Now let's go to the far southern portion, at least of Main Street, that we're focused on tonight, which is not all of Main Street, but as we talked about, a little further south. Here we are more on the southern part of Main Street. And you can see right here is Corning that comes into Main Street, and then looking north up Main Street. It becomes a little more auto-oriented as you head this direction. The streets get a little bit wider. Great. So hopefully a little extra orientation if anyone needs it for Main Street. That nasally version of me is me with a mask on, so that's why it sounded a little funky maybe, taken a couple months ago. So if we can have Liz come back to the PowerPoint, we're about to break up into small groups. Just want to talk through that really quickly. So we're going to do 3 groups tonight. We're not too big, so there will be probably 2 or 3 Milpitas staff in each group. Milpitas staff will not be answering a bunch of questions. The goal is to have you as community members talking amongst yourselves and having Milpitas staff just listen and learn your thoughts on historical and cultural resources. So if you do have questions for them, we ask you to put those in the chat function, follow up via email, but we want to focus this conversation on idea generation, which is a little different than, hey, staff, can you help me as a constituent or answer a question? So let's just keep that focus in mind. We're going to stop at 7:45. Liz will give us a couple minutes notice to wrap up. We'll come back to the larger group, and each small group's facilitator will share 2 key takeaways they heard from the group around historical and cultural resources, or really anything, as we'll ask some more general questions as well. And again, we'll share this presentation and these themes back with all of the folks who've registered for this event, as well as with the city, businesses, and other stakeholders. Next slide. So this is how the breakup of the next 45 minutes is going to go. We'll just talk a little bit about your group, get to know folks a little bit, ask some general questions about Main Street and what you'd like to see and experience. We'll spend the bulk of our time on historical resources. Then we'll talk a little bit about your thoughts on community benefits and amenities of the region, and finally of Main Street, excuse me. And then finally, just a little summary. What are your key takeaways around what you'd like to see on Main Street, particularly around historical and cultural resources? So we're going to break you off into those small groups now. Next slide, Liz. This will show how we do that. You'll see this button, join. If you can join that room in a moment when Liz activates it, that would be great. I will jump into different rooms and say hello and see how things are going. Make sure you and your facilitators feel supported. And then we'll bring you all back to the main room at 7:45. If you get kicked out of a room, no problem, come back to the main Zoom. Liz will put you right back in your room and keep the conversation going. Thank you, Milpitas staff, for taking notes on the discussion of these small groups. Let me know if you need anything in that regard. We'll see you all in 45 minutes. Thanks. Let's get Joseph into a room. And if the vice mayor wants to join one, she can. I know she's got to leave right now.